My name is Morgan Phillips, and on my wedding day, my parents disowned me. The last message I ever got from my father said, "Don't make a fool of yourself today." No blessing, no pride. Just a warning, like he was ashamed I existed. They never showed up. Two empty chairs in the front row had name cards that read, Mom and Dad. Everyone saw them. I pretended I didn't. When I said my vows, I could feel the emptiness sitting where their love should have been. It wasn't the first time they'd ignored me, but it was the moment I finally realized it wasn't silence anymore. It was rejection. And months later, when a single photo from that same wedding went viral, they suddenly demanded a family meeting. That's when I learned. Some people don't reach out because they miss you. They do it because the world finally told them what they refused to see. The morning light in Key West cut through the chapel windows, scattering gold across the parked FA-18s on the runway. I fastened the last row of medals on my uniform just as my phone lit up. One message, 4 words. Don't make a fool of yourself today. No greeting, no blessing, just cold steel wrapped in text. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, as if the phone itself was tired of waiting for warmth that would never come. Outside, brass horns blended with the sound of the tide rolling against the docks. Today was supposed to be my wedding, one meant to start a new chapter, not reopen an old wound. 2 chairs sat at the front row of the chapel. The place card said Mom and Dad. Both remained untouched. Jenna leaned close, whispering, "Maybe they'll come." I smiled, small and practiced. They already didn't. When I walked down the aisle, every uniform turned toward me, but all I saw were those empty white spaces glowing beneath the stained glass light. After the ceremony, Sam and I stepped onto the pier. The wind caught my veil, carrying it toward the sea. The tide doesn't wait for anyone. "Commander," he said. Neither did they. I answered, steady voice hiding the ache inside. As the guests left, I stayed behind, shoes polished, medals clinking softly. The sunset burned against the waves, and in that silence, I understood. Some absences echo louder than applause. A week after the wedding, I was back at Naval Air Station Key West. Morning light shimmered across the runway like ripples of glass, the kind that makes you forget for a second how sharp it really is. Inside the pilot's lounge, Jenna laughed under her breath and shoved her phone toward me. "Commander, you're trending!" I frowned, and there it was. The photo. Me and Sam, in our white uniforms, standing against the ocean, smiling like the world had finally softened. The headline on Navy Daily read, "2 aviators, 1 mission, service above self." The picture had already swept across every veteran forum, Twitter feed, and Facebook timeline. They called us the Navy's golden couple. Flags and heart emojis filled the comments, strangers writing proud to serve. As if they knew anything about the silence behind that smile, I didn't respond. I just exhaled, half a laugh, half a sigh. At that same hour in Charleston, my father was watching the same photo on TV, bourbon trembling in his hand. My mother stood behind him, her voice soft. "She looks happy." His jaw tightened. "She looks foolish." Then came the first sting. One of his old business partners reposted the photo on LinkedIn with the caption, "Didn't know Harold Phillips' daughter outranked half the Navy." His phone exploded with calls, laughter, jokes. "Looks like the Phillips name finally made the news. Thanks to your daughter." He hung up and poured another drink, his pride curdling like old milk. That night, while I was outlining flight training lessons, my phone buzzed. The area code read Charleston. I answered without a word. "Your mother and I need to speak with you. Family meeting. This weekend." "About what?" "You know what." The line went dead. No goodbye. No tone of a father calling his daughter. Just an order disguised as concern. Sam overheard. His voice was calm, steady as always. "If you go, go as yourself, not as their soldier." I nodded, watching a training jet lift off outside the window, slicing the sunset in 2. Maybe it's time they finally meet the woman they disowned. Later that night, I opened a drawer and pulled out my old flight logbook. The one my father threw away when I left home. The pages still smelled faintly of oil and dust. On the first page, his handwriting faded, but still there. Proud of you, Dad. Then a single strike through the words, deep and deliberate. I brushed the dust away, folded the cover shut, and whispered to myself, let's see if he still remembers this ink. The road to Charleston stretched along the Cooper River, the air thick with the scent of salt and marsh. The closer I got, the more the past seemed to sit in the passenger seat beside me. The white two-story house came into view. Same shutters, same porch, but the bougainvillea out front had died. The color gone out of everything. My mother opened the door. Her face was softer now, but her eyes refused to meet mine. Ethan appeared in the foyer, crisp shirt, easy smirk. Well, if it isn't our flying celebrity, still practicing your lawyer grin? I shot back, walking past him. In the dining room, my father sat at the head of the table, a steaming cup of tea in front of him. He didn't stand. He didn't smile. You made us look like fools. Morgan, by marrying a man who respects me, by parading your rank for attention. I placed my flight logbook on the table, the leather cover worn but intact. This was the first thing you threw away when I told you I wanted to fly. He opened it, staring at the faded ink. Proud of you, Dad. His eyes narrowed. That was a long time ago. That's the problem, I said quietly. You erased pride long before I earned it. He reached for the logbook, tearing at the spine. But my mother lunged forward and caught his hand. The paper ripped halfway, revealing the streak of ink smudged by water, tears or rain. I couldn't tell. The clock on the wall ticked, loud enough to drown out the silence. No one moved for a full minute. When I finally turned to leave, my mother's voice broke the stillness. Stay for dinner, please. If there's a seat for me. I stepped outside into the heavy evening air. The marsh smelled of salt and decay, the wind sticky and warm. That family meeting, I realized, wasn't about reconciliation. It was a hearing, one I was expected to lose. This time, though, I'd come in uniform. The dining room light glowed yellow, same as I remembered, soft enough to hide the cracks, harsh enough to expose everything else. My mother set 3 plates. Not 4. No seat for Sam? I asked. Her voice trembled. We didn't think he'd be comfortable. The walls still held every framed memory except mine. Ethan leaned back, smirking. So, you married your boss. Smart move. No, I said. I married a man who treats courage as respect, not decoration. My father's glass slammed down, shattering the air. This family was built on discipline, not spectacle. Then why does the world only know your name now because of me? He stood, finger pointed. You paraded your rank for attention. I earned it for survival. Silence thickened. I placed my old flight logbook in the center of the table. Do you even remember this? He glanced at it. It was a phase. Phases don't save lives. Dad. Pilots do. I walked out before the silence suffocated me. Neighbors watched from across the street, pretending to water lawns while feeding on our shame. My phone buzzed. Sam, you okay? They didn't even set a place for you. His reply came fast. Then maybe it's time I set one myself. The next morning, fog clung to the marsh when a jeep stopped outside. Sam stepped out in his Vice Admiral whites, silver glinting under sunlight. The neighborhood froze. My father's face drained of color. Inside, the air was thick enough to chew. You think she's a hero? He asked. I don't think, Sam said calmly. I know. He placed an envelope on the table. Inside, a letter from the Navy. Commander Phillips led aerial rescues during Hurricane Katrina. Her decisions saved 36 civilians and 3 Marines. My mother's hand shook as she read. My father's eyes dropped. You had this all along? Yes, I said, but it never mattered until someone else said it. He stared at me, the weight of years in his silence. Then Sam rose and offered his hand. Sir, thank you for raising the finest officer I've ever served with, and for the first time, My father took it. Rain threaded through the gray Charleston morning, fine and constant, the kind that made the air hum. My father stood on the porch, pouring coffee with a hand that trembled slightly. It was the first time I'd ever seen him unsure of his own movements. I asked if he wanted to come with me to the naval base. For a moment, he stared at the mug like he was reading his reflection inside it. Then he nodded. Fine. Let's go. We drove in silence, rain streaking across the windshield, the wipers marking time like a metronome. Halfway there, he asked if the Navy letter was real. I said it had been real 3 years before he called again. He didn't answer. At NAS Charleston, young pilots saluted as we passed. He nodded back, awkward among the uniforms. When I led him to the twin-seat T-45, he gave a nervous laugh. I flew once, 40 years ago, sightseeing. This won't be sightseeing, I said. When the engines roared, his knuckles whitened on the armrest. Through the headset, I told him, relax. Up here, control is shared, not owned. He said nothing, but I felt the words land. We climbed through clouds until the coast curved small beneath us. I never realized how small it all looks from up here, he murmured. That's what happens when you climb high enough, I answered. Later, as we banked over the Atlantic, his voice cracked through static. I understand now why you never came home. I was always flying toward it, I said. When we landed, he touched the dashboard gently. I didn't know it was this beautiful up here. It always was. You just had to look up. Then he surprised me. Dinner tonight. With your husband. That night the house glowed warmer than I remembered. 4 plates, 4 chairs. Sam's presence steadied the air. He spoke of the pilots I'd trained, and my father listened. Near the end of the meal, he pushed a yellowed envelope toward me. Our family land deed. It's yours again. I don't need the land, Dad. I just needed you to see me. I do, he said quietly. When Sam rose to clear the glasses, my father stopped him. I judged you before I knew you. I owe you respect. You owe her the peace she earned. Sam replied. My mother wept. The clock ticked softly. For the first time, it didn't sound like judgment, only like life continuing. Washington, D.C. woke spotless that morning. Clear sky. Flags snapping in the breeze along the marble corridors of the Naval Academy at Annapolis. Inside the dressing room, I adjusted the line of medals across my chest, fingers tracing every dent, every scratch. Each mark held a story. Each story carried a weight no one could see. And today, for the first time, my parents would. The door opened softly. Sam stepped in, immaculate in his Vice Admiral whites. His presence was steady, grounding. You ready, Commander? He asked. As I'll ever be, I said, though my pulse felt like an engine before takeoff, in the auditorium. Sunlight poured through tall glass panes, scattering across rows of uniforms. The air held that peculiar stillness that comes before ceremony. Half reverence, half electricity. I walked to the stage as the announcer's voice echoed. For exceptional courage and leadership during humanitarian operations. Applause rose like a tide. A senior officer pinned the Distinguished Flying Cross to my chest, the medal catching the light and burning gold. My breath caught, steady but shallow. When I turned toward the crowd, I found them, front row. My father sat rigid, shoulders square, gray suit pressed to perfection. My mother's hands clasped a neatly folded flag in her lap. They were both looking at me, not with the distant pride people perform for cameras, but with something raw, trembling between awe and regret. As I stepped off the stage, the room hushed. Then, slowly, my father rose. He took a few steps forward, stopped, and raised his hand, a salute, stiff, imperfect, but real. The hall fell silent. The sound of fabric brushing against itself echoed like thunder in a church. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I lifted my arm, returned the salute, crisp and sure, a gesture 15 years overdue. Commander Phillips, he said, his voice rough, breaking on the edges but clear. In his eyes, I didn't see pride. I saw respect, Finally unguarded, finally earned. When the drums rolled to close the ceremony, Sam leaned closer, his voice low and sure beside my ear. You didn't just earn a medal, you earned back the silence. I smiled, eyes fixed on the flag above the stage, the kind that finally means peace. The afternoon after the ceremony, we walked down to the open lawn by the Severn River. The light had turned the water to glass, gold breaking into silver as the sun slipped lower. The flags along the embankment moved lazily in the wind, and for the first time in years, my father's shadow stretched beside mine. Not ahead of it. He approached, holding a small velvet box worn soft with age. Your grandfather carried this during his first deployment in the Pacific, he said, opening it carefully as though the air itself might shatter it. Inside lay a silver pocket watch, initials H.P. engraved on the back. I remembered the story, how he swore he'd never give it to anyone who hadn't earned his respect. He placed it in my palm, the weight cool and familiar. Time owes you nothing, Morgan, but honor does. I closed my fingers around it. Then I'll keep it running, I said, voice tight, tears hovering but refusing to fall. The watch ticked softly between us, bridging a silence that had once felt like a canyon. Ethan came walking up from behind, hands buried in his pockets, face awkward. Guess you're the real Phillips now. I smiled faintly. No, we both are. We just chose different skies. For the first time, he didn't smirk. He just nodded. My mother stepped closer, laying a hand on my shoulder. Her eyes were gentler than I remembered, no longer guarded by apology. We kept quiet for too long, she whispered. Silence doesn't keep peace. It builds walls. I squeezed her hand. Then let's start talking. Mom. The river shimmered in front of us, quiet except for the rhythmic lap of the tide, the kind of peace that didn't demand words. As we turned to leave, my father looked at Sam. I misjudged you, Admiral. I thought men in uniform only wanted obedience. Sam met his gaze evenly. We want understanding, sir. My father's expression softened, years of hardness beginning to give way. Then I hope you'll help me learn it. The three of them, my father, my husband, my brother, stood together under the flagpole, a triangle of men who had all learned something about strength that day. No applause, no audience, just the quiet weight of forgiveness passing between them. When evening came, I sat alone in the hotel room. The city lights flickered across the river like tiny beacons. I opened the pocket watch. The steady tick filled the silence, not hollow anymore, but alive. I took my flight logbook from the nightstand and wrote the final line beneath years of missions and storms. Honor is not what others give. It's what you learn to keep, even when no one's watching. Then I closed the book, listening to the watch tick once more, each beat a reminder that time hadn't taken anything from me. It had simply waited for me to arrive. A month later, I returned to Key West, the place where everything had begun and ended, often in the same breath. The air carried that familiar blend of salt and sunlight, heavy with memory. The sun was sinking, melting gold into violet, painting the sky with the same quiet dignity that comes after a storm. I stood on the bridge overlooking the sea, the silver pocket watch resting in my palm. The metal caught the dying light, glowing like a miniature lighthouse guiding me back to myself. Beneath the bridge, the waves whispered against the pylons, soft and rhythmic, the same sound that once echoed through the chapel on my wedding day. Overhead, a formation of FA-18s cut across the horizon, trailing white smoke like lines of memory still in motion, never quite fading. I flipped open my flight logbook. On the last page, the ink had barely dried over the words I'd written that night after Annapolis. Forgive not because they deserve it, but because you do. I closed the book, listening as the waves kept time with the soft ticking of the pocket watch. The sound wasn't loud, but it was certain, patient, steady, alive. My phone buzzed, a message from my father. We'll visit next week. Your mother insists on bringing pie. A smile found its way to my lips. Bring her, not the pie. I typed back. The screen lit up again almost instantly. Proud of you, Dad. No strike through this time. No hesitation. Just truth. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of salt and fuel from the airfield nearby. I looked up, eyes tracing the glimmer of sunlight on the wings of a jet passing high above. For the first time in years, the sky didn't feel endless. It felt full of echoes, of closure, of quiet forgiveness. I whispered into the wind, letting it take the words where it wanted. For once, the sky doesn't feel so lonely. And as the watch ticked against my palm, I realized that peace isn't silence. It's knowing the noise has finally found its place. 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 Finally found its place.